The first sign that something was wrong wasn't an argument. It wasn't a strange text message. It wasn't lipstick on a shirt or a late-night phone call. It was a man standing in my living room, measuring my windows. I froze with my grocery bags still hanging from my hands. He looked just as surprised to see me. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said politely. "I didn't know anyone was home." I stared at him. "What are you doing in my house?" He frowned. "Your house?" "Yes." He looked confused for a moment before pulling a folder from under his arm. "I bought this property last week." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was impossible. "I'm sorry," I said. "You must have the wrong address." He slowly looked around the room. "No." He glanced back at the papers. "This is definitely 418 Willow Ridge Drive." My heart started pounding. "This is my home." He hesitated before quietly replying. "It was." Those single words felt like someone had knocked the air out of my lungs. He handed me a copy of the closing documents. I only looked at one page. There it was. My husband's signature. And underneath it, mine. Except, I had never signed anything. Not one page. Not one document. Not ever. Someone had signed my name. And suddenly, nothing around me felt real anymore. My name is Claire Morgan. For 14 years, I believed I had a marriage built on trust. Daniel and I met when we were both 27. He was ambitious, funny, patient. The kind of man who remembered birthdays, held doors open, and made everyone believe he was dependable. Or maybe, he simply knew how to play the part. We built everything together. Or at least, that's what I believed. The house wasn't inherited. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't bought with family money. Every dollar came from years of overtime, skipped vacations, and weekends spent renovating the place ourselves. I painted every bedroom, installed kitchen cabinets beside him, planted the maple tree in our backyard. Every corner of that house carried part of our story. Now, a complete stranger was telling me it belonged to him. The man introduced himself as Ryan. He looked genuinely uncomfortable. I honestly didn't know. I thought everything was handled legally. I could barely hear him. I was already dialing Daniel's number. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. His phone had been turned off. That had never happened before. I called his office. He resigned 2 weeks ago. My stomach dropped. "What?" "I'm sorry," the receptionist replied. "Mr. Morgan no longer works here." I hung up without saying another word. Resigned? He hadn't mentioned leaving his job. Not once. Ryan quietly packed his folder. "I'll give you some time." Before leaving, he paused near the front door. "If this really wasn't authorized, you should call a lawyer." The front door closed. And for the first time in years, the house felt completely silent. I spent the next hour searching every drawer, every cabinet, every filing box. Daniel's passport. Gone. His laptop. Gone. Half his clothes. Gone. The expensive watch his father gave him. Gone. The safe in our closet. Empty. Even the emergency cash we'd kept hidden behind the bookshelf. Gone. It wasn't panic anymore. It was certainty. He hadn't disappeared. He had planned this. I drove straight to our bank. The manager recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Morgan. I need to check our accounts." She typed for a few seconds, then stopped. "Is something wrong?" Several accounts were closed last week. I stared at her. "What?" "The funds were transferred." "Transferred where?" "I'm sorry. I can't discuss joint transactions without." "They're my accounts too." She looked uncomfortable. "I understand. But the transfers were properly authorized." "By who?" She slowly turned her monitor toward me. "Daniel Morgan. And Claire Morgan. Again. My signature. Again. Forged." I walked outside feeling numb. The numbers kept repeating in my head. Savings account. Investment account. Vacation fund. Emergency fund. College fund we'd started for the children we hoped to have one day. Everything. Gone. Nearly $900,000. Years of our lives. Erased in less than a week. The police station wasn't far away. I walked in carrying copies of every document I had. The officer listened patiently, then asked one question. When was the last time you actually saw your husband? 4 days ago. What did he say? He told me he had a business conference. The officer nodded while taking notes. Do you believe he intends to return? I looked down at the forged signatures. No. I think he planned this for months. A detective joined us 20 minutes later. His name was Detective Alvarez. He carefully examined the documents. This isn't just a missing person case. He looked directly at me. This could involve identity fraud, forgery, wire fraud, and potentially international financial crimes. Those words made everything feel even more terrifying. International? What makes you think that? He tapped one page. The destination bank isn't domestic. My heart sank. So, where did the money go? He looked at me quietly. We're trying to find out. That evening, I met with the first attorney recommended by Detective Alvarez. Her name was Rebecca Lawson. She had spent almost 20 years handling financial fraud cases. She didn't waste time offering sympathy. She wanted facts. Every bank statement, every mortgage document, every insurance policy, every tax return, every email, every text message. After nearly 3 hours, she leaned back in her chair. This wasn't impulsive. No. She looked at me seriously. This required months of preparation. Possibly longer. I felt sick. She continued. Someone helped him. What do you mean? Forging signatures this consistently. Finding international buyers. Moving nearly $1 million overseas. This wasn't one man's weekend decision. There was planning. There were professionals involved. I whispered. So, where do we even start? Rebecca smiled slightly. We follow the money. The next morning, Detective Alvarez called. We found something. I drove to the station immediately. He handed me several printed photographs. Airport security images. Daniel, dragging 2 expensive suitcases, standing beside a woman. Young, blonde, designer sunglasses, holding his hand. I stared at the picture. I've never seen her before. We identified her. He slid another page across the table. Vanessa Cole, age 32, luxury travel consultant. Recently left the country with Daniel. Destination: Spain. My chest tightened. Spain? Alvarez nodded. They boarded the same flight. I couldn't take my eyes off the photographs. Daniel looked happy, relaxed, like the last 14 years of our marriage had never existed. The detective quietly added, "There's something else." What? They didn't book hotel reservations. What does that mean? He placed another document in front of me. Property registration. A luxury beachfront villa. Purchased 3 days after our house sold. Paid entirely in cash. I slowly looked up. With my money? He nodded. We believe so. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. The house I'd spent 14 years building had become someone else's vacation paradise. Rebecca looked over the documents before quietly saying, "Good." I stared at her. "Good." She nodded. Because expensive properties leave expensive paper trails. She closed the file. And paper trails are exactly how we're going to destroy him. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Daniel standing beside that woman at the airport, smiling like he hadn't just destroyed 14 years of our lives. I kept asking myself the same question. She placed a thick folder on the conference table. Today, she said, we stop looking at Daniel as your husband. I looked at her. We look at him as a financial criminal. That sentence changed the way I saw everything. Rebecca had already filed emergency motions to freeze any assets that could still be traced back to the sale of our home. It wasn't enough to recover the money yet, but it bought us time. She explained that people like Daniel usually made one mistake. They get greedy. They think once the money leaves the country, nobody can touch it. That's almost never true. She slid another document toward me. This is why. It was a list of international wire transfers. One after another. Large amounts. Always just below the reporting limits that automatically triggered extra scrutiny. He's trying to avoid attention, she explained. But every transfer leaves a fingerprint. For the first time since everything happened, I felt something other than heartbreak. Hope. Later that afternoon, Detective Alvarez called. "We've got a warrant." "For what?" "Daniel's office." "But he quit." "I know." He left more behind than he realized. His former office felt strangely empty. The family photos on his desk were gone. The framed certificate he'd always been proud of. Gone. Even his coffee mug had disappeared. But criminals don't always remember digital footprints. The company's IT manager unlocked Daniel's old computer. Most of the files had been deleted. Or so Daniel thought. A forensic technician smiled. Deleted doesn't mean gone. Within an hour, dozens of files began reappearing. Emails, travel confirmations, financial spreadsheets, scanned documents. Rebecca leaned closer to the screen. There. She pointed at a folder named Project Blue Horizon. It sounded like a work project. It wasn't. Inside were scanned copies of passports, rental agreements, property brochures, luxury real estate listings in Spain. Every file had one thing in common. Vanessa Cole. One email made my stomach turn. It was dated almost 11 months earlier. From Daniel to Vanessa. Just a little longer. "Once I sell the house, we'll never have to worry about money again." 11 months. He had been planning this for almost a year. While I was repainting the guest bedroom, he was planning his escape. While I was making dinner, he was shopping for beachfront property. While I believed we were saving for our future, he was building one without me. The forensic team recovered another document. A spreadsheet. Every account Daniel had ever used. Some I recognized. Many I didn't. Rebecca circled 4 account numbers. "These were never disclosed during your marriage." "What does that mean?" "He opened them secretly. They've been receiving deposits for months." The dates matched perfectly. Small withdrawals from our joint accounts. $200. $500. $1,000. Amounts so small I never questioned them. Individually, they looked harmless. Together, they totaled more than $160,000. He hadn't started stealing last week. He'd been quietly draining our marriage for years. Detective Alvarez walked in carrying another folder. We found something interesting. Inside were immigration records. Daniel had entered Spain 6 different times during the previous 18 months. 6. I stared at him. He told me every trip was for business. They weren't. "What about Vanessa?" Alvarez nodded. "She arrived within 24 hours of every single trip." My chest tightened. So they were meeting. For over a year. Rebecca closed the folder. "I need you to prepare yourself." "For what?" "We're probably going to discover this wasn't just an affair." She looked directly at me. It was another life. 3 days later, that theory became fact. An investigator Rebecca hired contacted us through a secure video call. His name was Miguel. He lived near Marbella. "I've located the property." He turned his camera toward a beautiful white villa overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. My breath caught. It looked like something from a luxury magazine. Glass walls. Infinity pool. Private dock. Palm trees. A brand new Range Rover parked outside. I couldn't stop staring. "This was bought with our money?" Miguel nodded. "Completely paid in cash." Rebecca asked, "Who's living there?" Miguel zoomed in. The front door opened. Vanessa stepped outside wearing a white dress. She laughed as someone followed behind her. "Daniel." He wrapped his arms around her waist. They kissed. Like newlyweds. Like the last 14 years had never happened. I looked away. I couldn't watch anymore. Miguel continued speaking. "They've introduced themselves as Mr. and Mrs. Morgan." I felt sick. "They're telling people they're married?" "Yes." "They've become friendly with several neighbors." Rebecca asked, "Do they seem worried?" Miguel actually laughed. "No. They spend money constantly. Restaurants. Designer stores. Private yacht rentals. They behave like people who believe they're untouchable." Rebecca quietly smiled. "Good." I knew that smile. It meant she'd noticed something. "What?" "The richer they pretend to be, the easier they'll be to prove." The investigation moved quickly after that. Every receipt, Every purchase, every transfer, every luxury expense. Miguel documented everything. Designer handbags, fine jewelry, private schools they were considering, even construction permits for renovations on the villa. Daniel wasn't hiding anymore. He was showing off. And every photo became evidence. One afternoon, Rebecca called me unexpectedly. "I need you here." When I arrived, she pointed toward a single bank document. "Do you recognize this signature?" I looked closely. It looked like mine. Almost. Then I noticed something. The letter L in Claire leaned slightly to the right. Mine always leaned left. Rebecca smiled. There it is. The mistake. She placed several genuine signatures beside the forged ones. Now it was obvious. The differences were tiny, but they were enough. "Think it'll matter?" She nodded confidently. "It matters more than you realize." A certified handwriting expert examined everything. 3 days later, his report arrived. His conclusion was only one sentence. The question signatures were not written by Claire Morgan. Rebecca looked at me. "This changes everything." Just when I thought we'd uncovered the worst, Detective Alvarez called again. "We searched a storage unit rented under Daniel's old business." "What did you find?" "Boxes. Full of financial records. And..." He paused. "There was another passport." I frowned. "What?" "It belongs to Daniel, but under a different legal name." Every hair on my arm stood up. "What does that mean?" "It means your husband wasn't preparing to disappear. He was preparing to become someone else." The passport had been issued months earlier. Different surname, different address, different employment history. Everything looked legitimate. Except it wasn't. Rebecca stared at it for a long moment. This wasn't just fraud. This was identity reconstruction. He planned to make sure you'd never find him. I whispered. "But I did." She looked up and smiled. "No, we did." Later that evening, Miguel called again from Spain. His voice sounded different. More serious. "I think you need to see this." He switched the camera toward the villa. A moving truck was parked outside. Workers were loading expensive furniture. Daniel was giving directions. Vanessa looked nervous. Miguel lowered his voice. "I've been watching all day. They're preparing to leave." Rebecca stood up immediately. "If they disappear now, we lose them." She grabbed her phone. "I'm calling the International Recovery Team." As she dialed, Miguel suddenly whispered, "Wait." Someone else had just pulled into the driveway. A black luxury sedan. 3 men in expensive suits stepped out. Daniel's smile disappeared instantly. One of the men handed him an envelope. Daniel opened it. His face turned completely white. Rebecca looked at the screen, then at me. "I think someone else has found him." I didn't sleep after Miguel's phone call. The image of Daniel standing outside that villa, opening an envelope that drained the color from his face, replayed over and over in my mind. For the first time since he disappeared, he looked scared. I didn't know who those men were, but Rebecca had a theory. They weren't there to congratulate him. The next morning, she walked into her office carrying a cup of black coffee and a stack of legal files nearly a foot high. "We're done reacting," she said. "From now on, we control this." For the first time in weeks, I believed her. Rebecca arranged a video meeting with an attorney in Spain. His name was Javier Moreno, a specialist in international property fraud. His office overlooked the harbor in Malaga, but he wasted no time with small talk. "I've reviewed everything you sent. The forged signatures, the wire transfers, the villa purchase, the false passport." He folded his hands together. "This is bigger than a divorce. It involves financial fraud in 2 countries. I asked the question that had been haunting me. "Can we get the house back?" He nodded slowly. "If we prove the villa was purchased using stolen marital assets, the Spanish courts can freeze it." Rebecca looked at me. That's exactly what we needed to hear. Over the next 2 weeks, our lives became paperwork. Every receipt from the last 5 years. Every mortgage payment. Every tax return. Every insurance premium. Every renovation invoice. Rebecca wanted to prove one thing beyond any doubt. that our home had been built with joint marital assets, and that Daniel had no legal right to sell it using a forged signature. She said something that stayed with me. Judges don't care about anger. They care about evidence. So we built evidence, page by page. Then the first unexpected break came. Detective Alvarez called. We've located someone from Daniel's old office. Who? A former financial analyst. His name was Ethan Brooks. He had worked directly under Daniel for almost 3 years before resigning. At first, he seemed nervous. I don't want trouble, Rebecca answered calmly. You didn't create this trouble. He did. After several minutes of silence, Ethan finally spoke. I knew something wasn't right. What do you mean? I asked. Daniel started asking me strange questions about international transfers. He wanted to know how companies moved money without attracting attention. Rebecca leaned forward. Did you help him? Ethan shook his head immediately. No. I refused. So what happened? He stopped trusting me. 3 weeks later, he moved everything himself. Ethan reached into his backpack. I kept something. He handed Rebecca a flash drive. I wasn't sure why, but something told me not to delete it. Rebecca plugged it into her laptop. Inside were dozens of emails, draft financial plans, internal spreadsheets, even screenshots of conversations Daniel thought had disappeared. One spreadsheet had a title that made my stomach turn. Exit strategy. The document outlined every step. Sell the house. Close joint accounts. Transfer assets overseas. Purchase foreign property. Apply for second identification. Disappear permanently. Every date matched. This wasn't panic. This wasn't emotion. It was a business plan. For abandoning me. Rebecca looked at Ethan. You may have just saved this case. That afternoon, another surprise arrived. The manager from our local bank requested a private meeting. Her name was Linda. She looked exhausted. I've been thinking about your case every day, Rebecca asked quietly. Why? Linda swallowed. Because something happened that didn't feel right. She reached into a folder. I wasn't supposed to keep this. Inside was security footage from the day the house sale documents were notarized. The camera showed Daniel sitting across from a notary. Beside him, a woman wearing sunglasses. She signed documents pretending to be me. My hands started shaking. Rebecca paused the video. Zoomed in. The woman removed her sunglasses for just a second. Vanessa. Linda looked down. I questioned it. But Daniel insisted you'd had cosmetic surgery and didn't want anyone recognizing you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And you believed him? Tears filled her eyes. I shouldn't have. Rebecca remained calm. Did the notary verify identification? Linda nodded. Yes. Rebecca frowned. Whose identification? Linda opened another envelope. A driver's license. It wasn't mine. Someone had created a fake license using my name. And Vanessa's photograph. Rebecca whispered. This case just became criminal conspiracy. Within 48 hours, the district attorney became involved. Forgery. Identity theft. Fraud. Conspiracy. Money laundering. The list kept growing. Daniel thought he had escaped. Instead, he was becoming the subject of an international criminal investigation. Meanwhile, Miguel continued watching the villa. His updates became almost daily. Daniel and Vanessa were throwing parties. Expensive dinners. Champagne deliveries. Luxury cars. They laughed beside the infinity pool as if nothing in the world could touch them. One evening Miguel sent me a photograph. Daniel stood on the balcony holding a wine glass. Behind him, the Mediterranean stretched into the sunset. The caption simply read, "He looks very comfortable." Rebecca smiled when she saw it. Good. I laughed. You keep saying that. Because comfortable people get careless. She was right. Only 3 days later, Daniel made another mistake. He posted a photograph online. Not publicly. Just to a private account he believed no one else knew about. Unfortunately for him, one of his former coworkers still followed that account. The photo showed Daniel standing beside a brand new yacht. The caption read, "Best decision I ever made." Rebecca stared at the screen. Thank you. I looked confused. For what? For admitting you own assets. Javier immediately filed another emergency motion in Spain. The yacht. The villa. The luxury SUV. Every expensive purchase became part of the investigation. Daniel had accidentally documented his own fraud. Weeks passed. The evidence kept growing. And strangely, I started feeling less angry. Not because I forgave him. Because I realized something. He had spent years pretending to be smarter than everyone else. Now, every lie was being used against him. Then came the biggest surprise yet. Ethan called Rebecca late one Friday afternoon. I remembered something. What? Daniel had another phone. A burner phone. I saw him use it constantly. Do you know the number? I wrote it down once. He read the number aloud. Detective Alvarez immediately requested records. The phone wasn't registered to Daniel. It was registered to Vanessa. The call history revealed hundreds of conversations. Lawyers, real estate agents, banks, passport offices, even moving companies. Every single step of their plan was documented. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. They've built our case for us. That evening, Miguel called from Spain again. I've got news. What happened? They're hosting another party tonight. So, there are investors here. Rebecca frowned. What kind of investors? Miguel lowered his voice. I overheard Daniel. He's trying to convince people to invest in a luxury property business. I couldn't believe it. He thinks he can start another company? Rebecca actually laughed. Perfect. Why? Because fraud artists always believe they'll never get caught. She closed the laptop. But tomorrow, that confidence ends. Before she could explain, her phone rang. She answered, listened for nearly a minute, then slowly stood up. What is it? I asked. Rebecca looked directly at me. The Spanish court just approved the emergency asset freeze. At that exact moment, Miguel interrupted. Rebecca, there are police cars outside the villa. But he sounded confused. They're not here for Daniel. They're here for someone else. The camera shook as flashing blue lights filled the screen. Then, Daniel walked outside, smiling, completely unaware that the officers arriving tonight would be back for him next. The moment Rebecca received confirmation that the Spanish court had approved the emergency asset freeze, the atmosphere inside her office changed. For nearly 3 months, we had been chasing Daniel across bank records, forged documents, fake identities, and international transfers. Now, for the first time, he couldn't run. Rebecca immediately called Javier in Spain. We have the order. I already received it, he replied. The judge signed everything 30 minutes ago. What happens now? I asked. Javier looked directly into the camera. Now we make sure your husband learns something. What? Money can cross borders. The law can too. Within hours, copies of the court order reached every institution connected to Daniel. His Spanish bank, the local property registry, the marina where his yacht was docked, the dealership that financed his Range Rover, even the management company responsible for maintaining the villa. Everything was frozen. No withdrawals. No property sales. No refinancing. Nothing. Rebecca smiled. He just became wealthy on paper. But he can't touch a single dollar. Miguel continued watching the villa. Around noon, Daniel left wearing expensive sunglasses and carrying a leather briefcase. He looked completely relaxed. He had no idea his bank cards had already been blocked. Miguel followed him from a distance. Daniel stopped at a luxury jewelry store. A few minutes later, he walked out looking irritated. He tried another boutique. Same result. Then another. And another. Every card was declined. Miguel sent us a message. He's getting nervous. Rebecca only replied with one sentence. Good. That evening, Daniel finally called his bank. Miguel couldn't hear the conversation. But Daniel's body language said enough. He started pacing, then shouting, then slamming his hand against the hood of his SUV. When he ended the call, Vanessa walked outside. She looked concerned. Daniel tried to smile. He even laughed. But she wasn't convinced. She crossed her arms. Asked another question. Daniel looked away. For the first time. The perfect couple didn't look so perfect anymore. The following morning, Javier filed the official international civil lawsuit. Every page listed exactly where the money had gone. The sale of our family home. The forged signatures. The closed bank accounts. The wire transfers. The purchase of the villa. Luxury vehicles. Jewelry. Designer purchases. Private travel. Every euro was accounted for. Rebecca looked at me. He spent months stealing your life. We spent 3 months documenting every penny. 2 days later, everything exploded. Miguel called before sunrise. They're here. Who? The police. He turned the camera. 6 police vehicles surrounded the villa. 2 unmarked government cars stopped behind them. Several investigators carried large evidence boxes toward the entrance. Daniel opened the front door. At first, he smiled, probably assuming someone had made a mistake. One officer handed him several documents. Daniel skimmed the first page. Then another. Then another. His face lost all color. Vanessa stepped outside wearing a silk robe. She looked confused. One officer politely asked her to remain on the property. She immediately started asking questions. No one answered. Instead, investigators entered the house. They photographed every room, every computer, every phone, every receipt, every luxury purchase. Miguel whispered, "They're taking everything." One officer approached the garage. Inside sat the Range Rover, a motorcycle, and the yacht trailer keys hanging neatly beside the door. Another team headed toward the marina. By lunchtime, the yacht had also been seized. Meanwhile, Daniel kept insisting there had been a misunderstanding. Miguel managed to overhear one sentence. "My wife signed everything." One investigator calmly handed him the handwriting expert's report. Daniel stopped talking. Rebecca watched quietly. This is why evidence matters. No arguing. No emotion. Just facts. Around 3 o'clock, something unexpected happened. Vanessa walked away from Daniel. She wasn't crying. She wasn't comforting him. She walked directly toward one of the investigators. They spoke for nearly 20 minutes. Rebecca narrowed her eyes. Interesting. What? I think she's realizing something. Later that evening, Javier confirmed it. Vanessa requested her own attorney. I frowned. So she's trying to protect herself. From Daniel. He nodded. She probably believed he was wealthy. What if she didn't know the money was stolen? Rebecca answered before Javier could. Then she's another victim. That possibility surprised me. For weeks I'd imagined Vanessa as someone who knew everything. Someone who helped destroy my marriage. But the investigation painted a more complicated picture. She knew about me. She knew Daniel was married. But she apparently believed he was already divorced. She thought the villa had been purchased legally. She believed the business he described actually existed. Daniel hadn't just lied to me. He'd been lying to everyone. 3 days later, Vanessa officially agreed to cooperate. Javier called us immediately. She gave a statement. Rebecca asked, "What did she say?" Daniel told her he owned several investment properties in America. He claimed the villa was purchased after selling one of them. He also told her his divorce had been finalized months earlier. I sat quietly. Part of me wanted to hate her. Another part realized she'd been living inside a different version of Daniel's lies. The biggest surprise came near the end of her interview. She handed investigators a small notebook. Inside, Daniel had written every planned investment, future purchases, hidden accounts, passwords, and a list titled, Escape Plan B. Rebecca stared at the page. He had another escape route. The notebook revealed Daniel planned to move again. This time, South America. Different country, different identity, different bank accounts. He'd already started preparing. Rebecca looked at me. If Vanessa hadn't turned this over, he might have disappeared forever. Daniel didn't know she cooperated. He still believed they were fighting together. Until the next morning, Miguel watched as Vanessa packed 3 suitcases. Daniel tried to stop her. She pushed past him. They argued in the driveway for almost 15 minutes. Then, she climbed into a taxi without looking back. Daniel stood there alone. The villa suddenly looked much larger, much emptier. Rebecca smiled. He finally understands. What? You can't build a relationship on stolen money. But Daniel still wasn't ready to surrender. That afternoon, he hired one of Spain's most expensive defense attorneys. The lawyer immediately challenged the asset freeze. For 2 days, it looked like we might lose everything. Then Javier received another phone call. The judge wanted one final hearing. Rebecca turned toward me. This hearing decides everything. If we win, the villa stays frozen. If we lose, Daniel could sell everything before trial. I felt my stomach tighten. So this is it? She nodded slowly. This is the biggest day of the entire case. The courtroom in Malaga was packed. Lawyers, financial investigators, court officials, journalists, even representatives from Daniel's bank attended. Daniel walked in wearing an expensive navy suit. He looked thinner, more tired, but somehow still arrogant. He glanced toward me. Our eyes met for the first time since he disappeared. He smiled. A tiny, confident smile. Like he still believed he'd find a way out. Rebecca leaned toward me. Don't react. He wants to know you're still emotional. I took a deep breath and looked away. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The hearing began. Daniel's attorney rose first. He confidently argued that the villa had been purchased legally, that Daniel had every right to sell jointly owned assets, that there was no criminal intent. Rebecca remained perfectly still. She didn't interrupt. She didn't object. She simply waited. Then, the judge looked toward our table. Mrs. Lawson, you may present your evidence. Rebecca slowly stood up. She opened a thick black folder, then looked directly at Daniel. Your Honor, I'd like to begin with Exhibit Number 1. She placed a single document on the evidence table. Daniel leaned forward to read it. The confident smile disappeared instantly. He whispered something to his attorney. His attorney's face went pale too. I couldn't see the document from where I was sitting. But whatever Rebecca had just revealed, neither of them had expected it. Daniel leaned forward. His attorney reached for it first. Within seconds, the confidence both of them had carried into the courtroom disappeared. Rebecca didn't smile. She simply said, Your Honor, Exhibit 1 is the original purchase agreement for the villa. The judge adjusted his glasses. Rebecca continued. The payment used to purchase this property originated directly from the fraudulent sale of the Morgan residence in Illinois. She paused. We have the complete banking trail. Large screens inside the courtroom lit up. A timeline appeared. The sale of our home. The transfer into Daniel's account. The movement through 2 intermediary banks. The final transfer into the Spanish account that purchased the villa. Every transaction was connected. Every dollar had a destination. There was nowhere left to hide. Daniel's attorney stood. Your Honor, the funds became legally separate once transferred. Rebecca didn't even look at him. They did not. She handed another file to the judge. The signatures authorizing the sale have already been confirmed as forged. The underlying transaction was fraudulent. A fraudulent transaction cannot create lawful ownership. The judge slowly nodded while reading. Daniel lowered his eyes. For the first time since I'd walked into that courtroom, he looked defeated. Rebecca wasn't finished. Your Honor, we'd also like to submit additional evidence recovered from the defendant's storage unit. She held up the fake passport. Gasps spread across the courtroom. The judge stared at it. This passport carries another legal identity. Rebecca nodded. It was created months before the defendant disappeared. The evidence demonstrates clear intent to permanently avoid legal responsibility. Daniel's attorney tried to object. The judge raised a hand. Overruled. Then Rebecca revealed the final piece. Vanessa's notebook. She opened it to the page titled, Escape Plan B. The courtroom remained silent. Rebecca read Daniel's own handwriting aloud. Transfer remaining funds. Sell villa immediately if investigated. Leave Europe within 72 hours. New identity already prepared. She closed the notebook. Your Honor, this wasn't a marital disagreement. This was an organized financial fraud. The judge turned toward Daniel. Mr. Morgan, would you like to explain this document? Daniel stood slowly. He looked nothing like the confident man who had smiled at me before the hearing. He cleared his throat. My wife misunderstood everything. The judge waited. Daniel tried again. We were having problems. I intended to compensate her later. Rebecca quietly replied. With money you no longer had? Daniel said nothing. His attorney whispered something into his ear. Daniel nodded. Then, to everyone's surprise, he asked if he could address me directly. The judge hesitated before allowing it. Daniel turned toward me. His voice sounded softer than I'd ever heard it. Claire, I made mistakes. I know that. But we built everything together. I don't want us to end like this. For just a second, the courtroom disappeared. I remembered the man I'd married. The man who painted the kitchen with me. The man who promised we'd grow old together. Then I remembered the forged signatures. The empty bank accounts. The fake passport. The villa. The lies. The other woman. The years he'd spent planning my destruction. I stood, looked directly into his eyes, and answered calmly. You didn't end us in this courtroom. You ended us the day you signed my name. The room fell silent. Daniel slowly sat back down. He never looked at me again. After a short recess, the judge returned. Everyone stood. He began reading his decision. The court finds overwhelming evidence that the defendant knowingly engaged in fraud, identity theft, forgery, and the unlawful transfer of marital assets. My heart pounded. The purchase of the Marbella property is hereby declared subject to asset recovery proceedings. The villa shall remain frozen. The defendant is prohibited from selling, transferring, or borrowing against any related property. I squeezed Rebecca's hand. She whispered, We're almost there. The judge continued. All proceeds traceable to the fraudulent sale of the Morgan residence shall be returned to the rightful marital estate. I closed my eyes. For months, I'd wondered if I'd ever recover anything. Now, justice finally had a voice. The criminal investigation continued for several more months. Daniel eventually accepted a plea agreement rather than face multiple international trials. He admitted to forgery, identity theft, wire fraud, financial deception. The sentence included prison time, heavy financial penalties, permanent restitution, and a lifetime prohibition from serving as a corporate officer. Everything he'd worked to build was gone. The villa was eventually sold under court supervision. The proceeds first paid legal costs, then outstanding debts. The remaining balance came back to me, not because I wanted revenge, because it had always been mine. The yacht was auctioned. The luxury SUV was seized. The hidden bank accounts were emptied under court order. Even the expensive watches and artwork inside the villa became part of the restitution process. Daniel had once believed wealth could erase the truth. Instead, every luxury purchase became another piece of evidence. People often ask what happened to Vanessa. She testified honestly. The investigators confirmed she had known Daniel was married, but they also proved she had been lied to about almost everything else. She cooperated fully, returned jewelry purchased with stolen funds, handed over every document she possessed. Eventually, she quietly returned to Canada to rebuild her own life. We never spoke. And honestly, we didn't need to. Daniel had deceived both of us, in different ways. As for me, the first thing I did wasn't buy another house. It wasn't take a vacation. It wasn't celebrate. I rented a small apartment overlooking a quiet park. For months, I enjoyed something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. No lies. No hidden bank statements. No wondering where someone really was. Just silence. The kind that heals instead of hurts. About a year later, I bought another home. Nothing extravagant. No marble floors. No infinity pool. No ocean view. Just a bright little house with a front porch, a maple tree, and a kitchen filled with morning sunlight. When I signed those closing papers, I read every single page. Twice. The attorney laughed. I laughed too. Some lessons stay with you forever. One afternoon, Rebecca stopped by for coffee. She looked around the house and smiled. You know, I've handled hundreds of fraud cases, but yours is one I'll never forget. I asked why. She looked toward the backyard. Because most people spend their energy trying to destroy the person who hurt them. You spent yours rebuilding yourself. I hadn't thought about it that way. But she was right. Winning wasn't watching Daniel lose everything. Winning was waking up one morning, realizing I no longer thought about him first. Sometimes people ask whether I hate him. The truth surprises them. I don't. Hate keeps someone living inside your heart. And Daniel doesn't live there anymore. He's simply part of a chapter that ended. A painful chapter. But not the whole story. Looking back now, the biggest thing Daniel stole wasn't my money. It wasn't the house. It wasn't 14 years. He tried to steal my confidence. My ability to trust. My belief that I deserved honesty. He failed. Because those things were never his to take. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this. Never sign documents you haven't read. Never ignore financial details simply because you trust someone. Love should never require blind faith in money matters. The strongest relationships welcome transparency. They don't hide from it. And finally, no matter how carefully someone plans a lie, the truth leaves a paper trail. Eventually, someone follows it. And when they do, justice has a way of arriving exactly when it's needed. Lessons from this story. Trust should never replace transparency, especially in marriage and finances. A forged signature may steal property, but it can never erase the truth. Real wealth isn't measured by luxury homes or expensive cars, it's measured by integrity. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't getting revenge. It's rebuilding a life no one can ever steal from you again.